Welcome to the Sencast. My name is Dale Pickles, I'm the Managing Director of B Squared, and I'm the host of the Sencast. The Sencast is here as a way to help improve knowledge around SEND. Yes, we can go read books, there's lots out there and lots on the internet, but we're all very busy. We do not have that time to sit and read. The Sencast is also a great way to get the same consistent message to schools, external professionals, and parents. So we're all going to get that same message. In this week's episode, we discuss supporting complex needs in mainstream schools by using structured teaching approaches and preempting barriers to learning. This is a really big topic at the moment with increasing levels of SEN in schools, in mainstream schools, and those pupils being more complex need more support. And I was joined this week by Tanya Lefort from the London Borough of Ealing. And Tanya is a lead Senko within Ealing, supporting other Senkos within the authority. The Sencast is created and produced by us here at B Square, and as well as this podcast, we also have our Sencast session, which is our video CPD. And if you haven't accessed Sencast sessions, they are video CPD sessions, often with the same great guests we have on the podcast. And we run 9 live sessions. We have 2 free send briefings every year. And we also record 9 other sessions. And the sessions are £10 each, and they are yours forever. So you can watch live on the day or watch later. We now have over 150 sessions you can purchase and use for CPD across the whole school. And you can also subscribe now. Even better value. Now, let's get on with the podcast. In this week's show, we're discussing supporting complex needs in mainstream schools by using structured teaching approaches and preempting barriers to learning. My guest this week is Tanya Lefort from the London Borough of Ealing. And Tanya is a lead Senko within Ealing, supporting other Senkos within the authority. She has been working within the world of SEND for over 18 years. And Tanya now facilitates the MPQ Senko qualification with UCL and leads on ARP, SRP meetings for the local authority. Welcome to the show, Tanya.
Good morning, Dale. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. With the increasing number of children with SEND in mainstream schools and limited spaces in specialist settings, the need for inclusive, effective support is huge. And more children are arriving in classroom with more complex needs, and mainstream schools are being asked to meet those needs. But how can schools do this? Go on, I need the answer.
Okay. I mean, I don't have the answer, but I have...
There isn't one answer? There isn't just a nice, simple 5-step tick sheet you just work through?
There's not a magic wand, I'm afraid. But there are some strategies and tools, which I'm hoping that we can discuss today, which might help some teachers. As you know, it's not part of teacher training. SEN is not part of any ECT. It's very optional. If you've got an ECT that's keen, then they will come and ask you for some advice or some training. But mainly a lot of ECTs go in pretty cold. But also teachers that have been teaching in the profession for a long time are now having children in their mainstream classes that, years ago would have been in SEN schools. And I think it's imperative that we talk about, children having the right to a mainstream education, because it is important and parents want that. And that's absolutely fine. But it's how we adapt our curriculum and our approaches with our teaching to meet those needs. And I think the key thing to start on is that you get a lot of teachers sort of, the first thing is when they say, oh, so-and-so, he's in my class and he can't do anything. And that's where we start. He can't do anything. I have to tell him everything. And that for me just brings you back to the training with the structured teaching approach and looking at, what children can do and not what they can't do. Because my response is usually, well, do you have to tell them to breathe? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, so they can do something. So let's work with that.
But I find teachers, they have their comfort zone. Yeah. So somebody who maybe has been teaching in year 5 for the last few years knows year 5 extremely well. They'll know year 4 pretty well. But the further you get from that is completely out of their comfort zone. And they often cannot identify what level that child is working at when they're working so far below.
Absolutely. And it's really difficult, isn't it, when you're trying to plan a separate curriculum for that child. Where I try to steer teachers is to look at what we call high emerging skills. So the strengths that the children have, what they can do. And by looking at their high emerging skills, we can start to introduce new concepts. And that's where we look at structured teaching. So we look at what the child is interested in, We look at how we can set up systems so that we're not having to verbally prompt them, because actually a lot of neurodivergent children take a little while to process. So if you're having to constantly say to a child, go and get your pencil, or sitting, surely that you can put a visual system in place to try and support that so that the child becomes more independent. And that's where we look at, a lot of speech and language therapists will sort of put on the program now and next and visual timetables. Well, visual timetables work for all children. If you've got an environment that's low arousal and it's predictable, even your EAL children will be at ease as soon as they come into your classroom. Okay, I know exactly what I'm doing today. I've got all of the sessions up until break time. I want to know when lunchtime is, and I want to know where home time is. And it's the same as adults. When we go to training sessions, the first thing you're thinking is, when's the first coffee break? Or what time is this going to finish? So the 4 key questions I always ask teachers is, how does a child know what they're doing? What are they doing now? How much work have they got to do? How do I know when it's finished? And what's happening next? And if you can answer those 4 questions, then you're pretty much on it. What sometimes teachers respond is, well, I told him it was English, so he knows it's English. That's not efficient. So if we can put a system in place so that we know that child knows, okay, I'm doing English now. I've got to do 5 sentences, and that might just be that you write 1 to 5 in the column. How do I know when it's finished? It might be that you've got a visual timer available, a sand timer, and then what's happening next? Okay, I know that after English, it's break time. So just looking at the visual structure of the environment's really helpful, having it labelled. And again, it's just going back to basics really, and making sure that the stimuli in the classroom is going to have an impact. You go into a lot of classrooms in mainstream and it's so overwhelming. You've got bunting with punctuation on it, lots of displays, and actually, do we need that? Is that aiding learning? I know that if I saw a poster every day for the last 5 years, I'd start to not really worry about what was on the poster. It almost becomes background. So really looking at like working rules, success criteria that the child can access, and making sure that the important information for the children is really obvious, but staff information is kind of away, because again, it's differentiating. Is that important to me? Are those, bullying rules important to me? Or actually is Miss So-and-so's coffee break timetable important to me? So making sure that that's really clear. And also you can apply that to their work as well. I've had a lot of children, it's almost what we call learned helplessness, where they sit and they wait because they're waiting to be prompted, because that's what we do. We tell them what to do. And just allowing them to kind of struggle a little bit and just to kind of problem solve. So we have laminated checklists where it might say, pencil, date, learning objective, work, and they have to tick that off. And I say to teachers, you have to teach them how to use the system first. You can't just give it to them one day, stick it on their table and expect them to be able to follow that structure. You need to explicitly teach them. But once they've got that structure in place and that routine, children like predictability, so they will almost self-manage that. And it's also about not accepting the learned helplessness. So if you've taught them how to use the system, and then that they can use the system, just redirecting them back. Oh, sir, I've written the date. Check your checklist. And then just letting them learn to problem solve, because children need opportunities to problem solve. If we don't give them those opportunities, then they won't be able to problem solve.
That learnt helplessness is a really big issue, much bigger than people realise. And I think when you have, I'm going to say the way, bolt on a TA to a child, that can really lead to that learned helplessness, when that TA is doing everything for the child, when they're noticing problems. Like, we've got to do some writing, the pencil's not sharp, I'll just sharpen it. Before the child's even noticed, by solving all their problems, which is often trying to reduce stress or anxiety, you're then kind of, everything is done for them.
Absolutely.
And we can do that at home as parents. And you need to present them with problems, but you need to then help them find those solutions. So rather than you noticing that pencil is blunt and sharpening it, maybe go, oh, your pencil's blunt, what do we do? And getting them involved in that. So they're not sitting there waiting for you. My wife, who teaches in a special school where children come from mainstream, they will go, my nose is running. And then they sit there and look at my wife going, like, you are going to solve this problem. And she's like, what do you need? Like, a tissue. And where are the tissues? And they point. They say, well, why don't you go get one?
Yeah.
And it's kind of, when things are done for you so much, you rely on it.
Absolutely.
And you become that learnt helpless. And that's not going to, in the moment, initially, that might be a good thing.
Yeah.
But long term, for their life, we do not want that.
No. And I think going back to what I was saying about having those structures and systems in place, if you're verbally prompting all the time, you need to take that verbal response away. It's like, I always have to tell him to get his book. Well, we don't tell him anymore. Put a system in place and let him start to self-manage and learn. And I think also making opportunities for problem solving for children as well. I know some children are reluctant to communicate, and that's fine, but it might be something as simple as, not having a chair available, so that they have to come and say to you, Miss, I don't know where my chair is, or I can't find a chair to sit on, so that they're having to realize that actually we can help them, but actually they need to identify the problem first. And going back to, putting the systems in place for problem solving and using their high emerging skills, what motivates them to be able for them to actually engage in the learning. So I always think about making sure that if we preempt every barrier that they're going to come across and we put a system in place, we're not really needed. We don't need to sit with them all the time. And what we are finding constantly is that people are asking for more adults to support these children to do exactly what you just said, to basically tell them how to get through the day, and also like almost take away that executive functioning away from them, because actually they need that to be able to, cope as they transition into adulthood. So again, looking at where are they getting stuck? Why are they getting stuck? And what can we put in place for that? And I always say to educators, to teaching staff, we are practitioners. We don't know everything. We have to reflect on our practice. So if something's not worked in that lesson, 9 times out of 10, it's because we've not put a system in place for that child to be able to access that learning. So being reflective about that, because some people are reluctant to kind of look back and think, actually, was that resource as good as it probably should have been? Or did I, sort of just think, oh, actually, I'll just print something off quickly and give it to so-and-so for him to do so that he's engaged. So really making sure that your resourcing is really looking at it. And whenever I resource for the children that we have in our additional resource provision, I try and do the resource myself, trying to think about that child and where they may get stuck. And then by doing that, I can identify, actually, that's not clear. And children are really, really good at teaching us how to be better teachers. I genuinely believe that. I've got an example of a child where I set up a structured teaching box for him, which is really easy. All you need is, those big fruit boxes that you get the fruit at school. You grab one of those, you get an A3 sheet and you blue tack it in, and then you can section that off. And all I wanted him to do was to put one peg in one box, 2 in the second, so on and so forth, up to 6. That's all we were doing. I wrote on a post-it note 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I sectioned it off into boxes so that it was really visual. I've got 6 things to do, and then I'm finished, and I'll look at my timetable and I get my reward, because we need to motivate children to learn as well. We're motivated to go to work because we get paid for it. So children are exactly the same. They need that motivation. And some children don't. And I think that getting the balance of that is some children, most children in your class who are neurotypical, don't need 10 minutes on the laptop when they finish their work. And that's fine. Everybody's different. But that child may need, a laptop for 10 minutes or something that motivates them, whether it's playing with cars or Lego, whatever works, get them motivated. So this young man, I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I gave him some pegs to put in, and it was amazing. What he did is he put all the red ones in one box, all the green ones in the other box, and all the blue ones. So what he thought I was asking him to do was to group by colour. And I just looked at my resource and I was like, okay, I see what's happened here. And I took a photo of it, and I use that in my training quite often to say, look, I looked at that and thought, okay, see what happened, what went wrong here, what do I need to do next, how can I re-resource this and make sure that he's understanding what I'm asking him to do. So I went back, re-resourced it. And what I did is I just drew around the counter, and then 1 in 1 box, 2 counters in 2, 3. And so then he was like, oh, okay, all right, that makes sense. So just putting that visual clarity around that counter, he was able to go, oh, okay, what she wants me to do is just do 1 to 6 in counters to show quantity. And that was it, done. But as I said, we have to be reflective in our practice and provide that visual clarity. Otherwise, the children will not be able to access the learning. And I would have to sit with him and say, put 1 in there, put 2 in there. I don't need to do that because I've preempted where he's going to get stuck. I've put a visual structure in place. He's now done an activity independently. So he's buzzing now because he's done something on his own. He gets his laptop. There we go. And I think that's the key thing, is really building up the self-esteem of these children, because they look around the classroom and everyone else is getting it and I'm not getting it. But that older lady is going to come and sit next to me and show me what to do. That's just soul destroying. Like, there's always some, older person just sat with them, pick up your pencil. We need to stop doing that, because actually it's not financially sustainable. And all we're doing for these kids, as you said, is just learned helplessness. What's going to happen when they're adults?
And that learnt helplessness isn't something that just happens kind of in the classroom. That learnt helplessness also comes to socialization and everything. So when they just sit there and everything they need is given to them, they're not learning, they're not having those conversational skills with anyone where they're going, oh, I haven't got this. What do you do? Well, I don't. And having that back and forth. So you kind of start to really rely on that person as your person you talk to.
Yeah.
Whereas if you kind of remove that adult, and they might have to talk, or says it might have to, and they're on that table with other children, and they ask those other children, oh, I'm struggling with this, or how do I do this, or my pencil's blunt, oh, here's a sharp. You want them to be having those conversations with other children, not just be, this is my adult, this is who I talk to.
Absolutely.
And once you kind of start isolating them within the classroom, that isolation carries on throughout the rest of the school.
Yeah. And I think what's really important is the sort of introduction of mixed ability groups. I think that's been really, really interesting, because actually it's so much better to have those children in a mixed ability rather than sat on a table with the same. And it's usually the teaching assistant, let's be honest, is sat there with 4 kids now that have no idea what they're doing, but she knows that she's got to get the work done because that's what the teacher wants. So it's almost that they're prompted to complete a task that they don't really understand, but it's almost like all 4 of them are sat there all looking at each other thinking, I haven't got a clue what's going on here. Whereas if you put them in mixed ability, as you said, if they are able to verbalize and say, look, I'm stuck, other children can help them. But also they may have a different resource. For example, we were doing science the other week, and there was a young man who's not been at any school before. So he's coming in year 3. And they were just sorting out living things versus non-living things. Now, I know that one of his high emerging skills is he can differentiate between red and blue. So all we did is we got loads of pictures of living things versus non-living things. And all I did was color code the living things in a blue border and the non-living things in a red border. So the pictures had a red and a blue border. And then on his sheet, I just did 2 boxes, 1 red, 1 blue. So all he's doing now is putting all the blue things in a blue box and all the red, but he's doing it on his own. And people are saying, well, yeah, but you're just giving him the answer. But we're starting to make some connection here, aren't we? Because if I've grouped a load of things with eyes and ears, then against, things that are like wooden or a chair, I'm starting to make a connection here that actually she's telling me that these things also have something in common. And that's where we have to go back to the filing cabinet and say that filing system's not in place yet. We need to teach what goes in that filing system. And by doing that, he's doing different work, but he's on a table with other kids that are, they're writing a list of things that are living against non-living. He's still taking part in the activity. He's still doing what the learning objective is. It's just slightly different for him. And it was just, like I said, it's people, oh, you're giving him the answer. We're always giving kids the answer. That's teaching, isn't it? We're supposed to tell them what we want them to know. They don't know these things yet. We have to give them that information.
The thing is, it's one of those things of, for the more able children, they get the idea of sorting and grouping by different things.
Yes.
If you don't know what that bit is, doesn't matter what you're asking to sort a group by, if they don't understand. So you're going, right, so that's a bit too high level, that bit, but let's get the sorting bit done.
Yeah.
So would you say that is adaptive teaching or differentiation?
Oh, that's a very, very tricky question, because I know that differentiation is kind of like getting booted out at the moment. So I'd say adaptive teaching, actually, because differentiation, I mean, I must admit, like, we've only just kind of reviewed how I think differentiation is really, it can be quite tragic, can't it? Because you've got those acronyms. So you've got LA, less able. That's horrible. What a horrible thing to say. And it goes back to a quote, I think was in a Great Expectations, which is by Senko in Hound. So his name escapes me now, which is terrible, but we can edit that bit out. But he's, Mo Farah, you could say he's a low ability shot putter. Do you know what I mean? And I love that quote, because actually we don't want less able, we don't want more able, and we don't want high ability. So what we're trying to say is, you've got children that you need to challenge and there's children that you need to support. So I think adaptive teaching would be my preference, if I'm honest.
Because the thing is, I think adaptive teaching can only really go so far. If you this is what we're working towards.
Yeah.
Adaptive teaching kind of has a range.
Yes.
To me. And once you start getting beneath that range, in terms of you are doing something different. But and I think this is the thing where there is an original definition of differentiation, and then the government came up with their own definition, which is the bad version.
Yeah.
The original definition is to adapt. What is it? But I think the thing is by some children, you are with that sorting, you are looking for a different outcome.
Yeah.
For those children, are they able to sort by living and non-living?
Mm-hmm.
Is this child, are they able, by putting the colours on?
Discriminating against.
You're now going, right, so you're teaching them about sorting and grouping. So it's a different outcome, but the main thing is you're not doing it in isolation.
No.
And that's the thing. I think when we think of differentiation, we literally think of giving them some work, giving it to TA, and they're sitting there on their own, doing their own thing. Differentiation can be doing the same topic, doing very similar stuff, but at a level which suits them.
Yeah.
And I think when we do things like, so you got schools do stuff like White Rose Maths, and you're a year 6 class, and we're doing year 6 White Rose Maths. Some of the children in that class who might be working much lower, doing year 6 White Rose Maths is going to be a table full of children going, I don't know what we're doing. I don't see the point of this. The TA writing down the answers so you get the work done, rather than going, okay, let's just bring this down to where they're working, which is going to be different, but you're still linking it into the same things. And I think one of the things I thought adaptive teaching is, if you're having to prepare something beforehand, that's differentiation, which is bad. Whereas you should be able to just adapt it on the fly. And I'm sort of going, for some of these children, you will need to prepare something different. You will need to do something, so you've got it. And you can't get away from that.
No. And I think that's where some teachers maybe lack the experience or skill set to be able to kind of say, actually, these guys are going to get really stuck on this tomorrow. So what can I do that's not completely different from what everyone else is doing? So if I'm thinking about dividing by 9, it might be that we're just doing multiples of 9. And that might just be that we get a number grid for them. And again, we just get them to count up to 9 and just shade in all the multiples of 9. So it's still within the context of the learning objective.
Yeah.
Now, I can do that because I've spent so long working with a small group of children and applying, my training and going, actually, that needs to be rejigged 100%. And when you work in a additional resource provision, you've not got a year 3 class, you've got a key stage 2 classes, you've got all the way 3, 4, 5, and 6. So again, you're having to do 4 different curriculums for those kids. But you do it because you want to, and you have to, because you need them to build up those foundations to be able to access the next phase. So I can do that. And the people that I work with that are specialist trained can do that. But again, it's for a mainstream teacher, that is really difficult to kind of go back and say, right, where are they going to get stuck? what do they need before they can get to this, and this, and looking back at, and sometimes you do have to look back at year 1 and kind of go, right, we're in year 4, but we've got some gaps. We've got a spiky profile here. What is it that I need to do to be able to divide by 9? What are the skills before that? And then implementing that and making sure that they have that resource available. And as you said, not just all sat on one table doing different work. That can be done with their peers. And most neurotypical children understand that, we're very lucky in my school. All the children understand that, so we're all different and we all need different help at different times. And it's very, very rare nowadays that you'll get other kids going, why is so-and-so doing that work? That looks really easy. Why is he doing that? They just crack on because they're just like, all right, he's doing that. We're dividing by 9. He's doing multiples of 9. And again, it's just going back and having the confidence. But I think mainstream teachers just get a little bit scared of that. And I understand, because if you've not had that training, it is really difficult to identify where a child may get stuck, or, like, as you were saying, where are they working at now? And how can we move them on? And not being afraid to kind of go back and say, well, actually, these are the things that we need to be able to progress. So let's just work on that for now. And I think it's important that if you can justify that and say, that's what we're doing now, but still have the high expectations, because I think that's another thing. And I don't want to sound too negative at all, but I think when you get teachers that have got low expectations, it's almost like they'll just give them, some pneumocon to do, and everyone else is doing this. And there's sorry, go on.
I would say I don't always think it's low expectations. I think it can often look like that, but it's more like, this is my year 6. I know what I'm doing. I don't know how to support them, so I will just give. It's not I've got low expectations. It's almost like I don't know what my expectations should be.
Yeah.
And I think that is, I see that quite a lot, that they don't actually know what that child is capable of. And and it's like, come on, that should be the starting point. That should be, if they're a year 6 child, where's the information from the previous teacher to show you where they are working and what they're capable of? That information should be there to help you know. There are adults in the school, not in maybe the first year, but again, further up, there are adults you can talk to find out where they're working. But I think we've come into kind of stuff like White Rose Maths, where it is almost sequenced for you. I cover this throughout this year. If they don't fit into that, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And I think working in like the additional resource provisions, things like that, rather than just going, this is the curriculum we follow, I think you are much more, these are the children we have. This is the ideal. Where are the gaps? Your curriculum is meeting their needs, rather than you just trying to take those children through the curriculum. And I think it's a very different way of looking at things, that I think that step has to be made in how you think about the curriculum.
Yeah. It's
not about getting the children into that curriculum. It's getting that curriculum onto the children and how it's going to work for them.
Yeah. And I think it's sharing good practice, which we just don't have time. People don't have time to come and observe. And I think having an additional resource provision is a real strength, because you can say, look, just come over, see how we do maths. We'll show you how we set it up. We'll show you how we resource it. We'll show you how we try and get the kids to do some independent learning as much as possible by setting up, sort of structured tasks. And then if you like it, we can co-resource together. We can co-plan. I can come in. But even we find having the time to do that is really difficult. But even if we do a training course for the local authority, a lot of teachers they can't be released to come and do that. And I think that's where we're not investing enough, maybe, in, would we release, a teacher to go on a safeguarding course? Yeah, we probably would, because we have to, right? But when it comes to SEN, it's almost like, we're really short for cover and so sick this week, and we're not able to do that. And I think we are getting there. Don't get me wrong. I've worked in the same local authority for 10 years now, and there has been masses of progress, but we still really need to start investing in mainstream teachers to support them to access the strategies that they need to be able to support these children. Because, as you said, they just not used to this style of teaching. And, if someone's been working at the same school for years and they're in year 6 and they get a child that comes in that's pre-verbal, that's not got any paperwork, there's been no referrals made, it's like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Because I need to get to SAT, right? That's my aim. And I get that, priorities are different, but I think we do need to invest more in releasing those teachers to go and access the right courses. But again, it comes down to finances as well, because some of the courses, that I've been on in the past, I'm talking like 3-4 grand. But it's a real tough one, because you try and the role of a Senko is changed, I think, quite significantly as well, because I've always been very hands-on, because I was a teaching assistant. That was my first job in an SEN school. So I'm very, very hands-on. But then on the flip side of that, I've got a massive to-do list in terms of referrals and annual reviews and provision mapping and parent meetings. So it's balancing out the all the referrals and the to-do list with actually getting into classes and showing teachers or modeling or supporting. And that becomes very, very difficult. I think if you are a Senko and you've not worked in an SEN school, I don't know how that would look like, if you would feel confident enough to kind of go in and say, can I just work with so-and-so today? Because I feel like I could just give you some ideas and some strategies. And then maybe, we could meet up and discuss that. And that's another thing why I'm quite happy about doing the MPQ Senko, because I feel like when I did it, it was very theory based. It was very much, this is what your job is, this is the legislation, this is what you're going to be doing day to day. But actually, the realization is that shouldn't be what you're doing day to day. You should be getting in classrooms and modeling to teachers, this is how you work with children. But again, if you've not got an SEN school background, that's going to be really, really difficult, isn't it? Because we can all read books, but actually, what does that look like in practice? And it's trying to balance that with the other needs of the other children, the children that need to be challenged as well. So I think it's tough, really, isn't it? It's quite depressing when you think about it.
In your experience, and we are talking about children who are working below and things like that, and would you say the barriers for the school and for the teachers, is it that kind of level of cognition, level of need, or is it kind of actually the barriers, the things that causing the issues are the communication, social emotional independence? Is it those things that are actually more causing the barriers for schools, that are kind of maybe causing disruption in the classroom, that are kind of leading schools to, we cannot support this child?
Yes, but I am a big believer that behaviour is a form of communication. Massive believer of that.
It is completely, and what I'm kind of getting towards, it's not necessarily that level, that pupil's level of English or level of maths that's the problem. It might be them their needs not being met. So actually the work you're giving them is miles too hard, miles too easy.
Yeah.
And they don't know how to let you know that.
Yeah.
And they might be unhappy for various reasons, but they don't know how to kind of have relationships, have friendships. And it's all those sorts of things that, again, if we go back to that bolting on that TA and kind of that learned helplessness, is kind of causing.
Yeah.
And actually, I think in my wife's school, what they spend a lot of time doing is not the English, it's not the maths. It's helping the children see that they have options, they have decisions, how to support them through those decisions, how to unpick what went wrong, and how could they do things a different way. So a lot of the work they're doing is not actually around the curriculum.
Yeah.
It's those softer skills which are causing disruption, which are the barriers to learning. And I feel in mainstream, again, as you said, they're so pressed on time that they don't have the time for those things. But that is often, by not spending time, that is causing those issues, because they are being disruptive, because they are trying to communicate, but they don't know how to communicate.
Absolutely. And I think the key thing is looking at the behaviour and why the behaviour is happening. And like you said, is it because the work's too easy? Is it too hard? Let's start there. Let's put some predictability in the day. Let's make sure that the work is scaffolded, or that they can self-scaffold, that they can access it independently. And then if you can say, I've done all of those things and we're still having some issues, don't get me wrong, I think there are some children that really do struggle in a mainstream class of 30.
Yep.
And that is that, there are variables that we cannot control. There are environment variables that we just, as much as, there's a big thing about ear defenders at the moment, which I wasn't aware of. There's a bit of controversy on the old ear defenders. And that's what, I've still got children that request ear defenders within a small class setting because they all trigger each other. We stick them all in a room, don't we? There's a load of children with autism and we stick them all in a room, expect them to get on with each other and tolerate each other. And bless them, most of the time they do, but they are going to get annoyed with each other and irritated because they've got their own agenda, their own transition needs. I mean, if I think about transition times in our provision, we have to preempt, 10 different ways to transition a child. So he needs the laptop, she needs to go and wash her hands. That child needs to make sure that she has, goes on the trampoline before it's lunchtime. That one needs to listen to a lunchtime song before they go. So you're constantly preempting that. And you're not, 9 times out of 10, it works very well, but you're still going to have some behaviors. Those children are not going to be able to access a mainstream environment, regardless of whether your quality first teaching is amazing, whether your environment's low level. And also you don't want to be saying to all the kids, like, we need to keep it down because, Tanya doesn't like loud noise. If you can put those systems in place, if we're, whether we disagree or agree on ear defenders, if that's that child, it helps that child. If they can access a mainstream environment with all of those things, and we're still getting the behaviour, then we do need to start tracking it and unpicking it and thinking, what is it that we can do as a school to be able to support with the behaviour? And as you said, it might be like recognising that when they're getting anxious or recognizing that actually they're finding something really hard. What's on the flip side of that, what's even more concerning is the children that internalize it. That they're the ones that worry me the most, is because they're the ones that sit there and inside they're bubbling and then they go home and that's when the behavior, because they've sat there all day trying to mask it, and then they get home and you get the parent coming in saying, we're having a really tough time, and then the teacher's like, oh yeah, but they're fine with us, they're fine at school. And that's really difficult for parents to hear. And it's about, still, just because the behaviour is not being displayed at school, we need to unpick that and think, what is it that we're doing wrong here? Because it's usually us that's doing it wrong. Let's be honest. It's not the child. The child is trying to say, something's not right, you need to fix it. Can you fix this for me? And I think sometimes the go-to in mainstream is what we call the square peg and the round hole. And it's like, oh, it's not fitting, so we need to change a placement here. Well, actually, we know, and as we've discussed earlier, that there are no placements. Like, it's devastating. We need to use what we have and see if we can support those children. And as you said, it might just be going, actually, is English important at the moment? Do we need to just learn about what happy feels like, what sad feels like? And we've just introduced an interoceptive curriculum at our additional resource provision. And I'd never heard of this before. And we're very lucky because we have a lovely occupational therapist who has introduced this to me. And it's fascinating because it's about teaching children what their body feels like, but also what their body is. Because, we take it for granted that they know what their hands are and they know what their feet are. And actually, when she said it to me, I was like, again, going back to that thing of, we have to teach the children. They don't know. They don't have any previous knowledge. They don't have any prior knowledge. So we have this really fun curriculum where we do different things with hands. So we have like, what does hot feel like? What does cold feel like? What does wet feel like? They loved the one on the tongue because we brought in that popping candy. So, and I just took it for granted again. And I've worked in this industry for a long time, that children know what their body parts are. They don't. Amazing.
No, they don't.
No.
And there's also, it's a really simple quote that Claire Ward said. And it was, they're called feelings because we feel them. And I just went, yeah, it's not just a facial expression. It is part of your body. And even now as an adult, I sometimes going, oh, my Apple Watch will go, your heart rate's up. I'm going, oh. I'm going, my shoulders feel strange. I sit there going, apparently I'm angry. Or I'm wound up. And I'm going, okay, but what am I wound? And I have to literally, and as an adult, I sit there and I don't notice my body is really tense. I'm going, okay, what's caused? And I'll unpick it and go, oh, I did annoy me, but I thought I was over it. I'd moved on. Apparently my body hasn't.
No, it's a delayed process, isn't it? And I think that's the key thing is that, even before this, this morning when I was getting ready for the podcast, I'm naturally quite a chatty person, as you can tell. But even I was starting to feeling a bit nervous. I was like, oh, and even as an adult, although I know there's nothing to be nervous about, my body was still, my hands were a bit clammy. I thought, oh, I'm really thirsty. And it's really important. I think all children should learn about that, because it's, we can't say to children, oh, stop, no hitting or kind hand, if they don't know why they're doing that. And it's about recognizing what that feels like. And I think that's just, so important in terms of, supporting with their behaviors, that they recognize it's not going to happen overnight. This is another thing. These strategies do not work overnight. This is consistency. And that's really hard in a school where you've got lots of different adults with lots of different thresholds. Because that is, even as a parent, if you say, no, you can't have that chocolate biscuit, your child will go to the other parent and go, can I have a chocolate biscuit? Because that's what kids do. They go, oh, I need to go. And we all have different thresholds. So trying to be consistent with a behavior approach is very difficult, because some adults will, kind of be less tolerant. Some adults are really patient. And it's about those, if we want those children to recognize, I'm feeling angry, but I'm not supposed to hit people, that's going to take a really long time, isn't it, to be consistent and to teach the child, when you're feeling angry, these are the things that you can do. Because actually just saying, oh, stop hitting, that's not going to work, is it? We need to go, no. Right, I can see you're angry and acknowledge that. What can we do when you feel angry? And it's really important as adults that we model to children that we also get angry, but we have the life skills to know that we can't just go up and slap somebody around the face, actually. But we would have done when we were younger. But we know that we can't do that. But we've learned that, right, over a period of time.
But also we learn as we grow up that I want chocolate, and your parents say no. What they don't say, which probably really would help, no, because dinner's in 20 minutes. But we don't say that. We just say no.
Yeah.
And they get angry.
Absolutely.
But I think as you get older, it's not only do you learn how not to slap people, also the things that make you angry, you understand it more, so it doesn't make you angry. Anger is a valid response. Anger is a valid response. Being in the red zone is fine if it's the right response.
Yeah.
Red isn't bad. If you go to Central, no. Red doesn't mean bad. Yeah. If you've just had some really bad news, yeah. If your football team was about to win the Premiership and then they didn't, red is the right reaction. That's fine. But you know that actually you've got to be careful of things you do. If you're in the red zone,
yeah,
you've got to be careful. If you are not feeling well, then blue is the right thing. So it's not bad or good, but it is helping them see actually you've got to be careful when you're feeling this.
Yeah. And it might just be that you need to take yourself off for a walk or go and offer to do a job or whatever. And I think it's, again, going back to what you were just saying then, it's language, isn't it? Language is so imperative. Us as adults need to be really, really aware of our language when we are speaking to all children, but particularly neurodiverse children, because we know that, there's 4 different ways to say, sit down and listen to me. And I could say, right, good sitting, and you might say sit down, and then the other person might say chair. And we almost over prompt those kids. And we do it because we just like to talk all the time. And if somebody doesn't do something straight away, we jump in again with a different good sitting, or sit down now, chair. Hold on a second. Which one do you want me to do? Because you've just given me 3 different things to do. And now I don't know what you want me to do because you said 3 separate things. We know that might mean the same thing, but actually for those children, and it's about, again, going back to the learned helplessness, giving children just process time, just let them process. And then if they're still not doing it and you're having to prompt them again and you're still having to prompt them, just put a system in place. Again, it could be a visual, like it's sitting time or good sitting. And I find it really difficult because I remember somebody saying to me, you should count to 10 in your head when you verbally prompted somebody. So good sitting. That's a long time. That felt like a really long time. But you do, because most of the time they would be sat by the time you count to 10. But if you'll keep telling them the same thing constantly, you're going to get the behavior, because you just overstimulating constantly. And we do it all the time. And more so in mainstream classes, because we need to get stuff done. You said there's pressure. We need to get this done. And I think it's really important that adults do reflect on their language and what they're saying and what they're not saying. As you said, can I have chocolate? No. Does that mean forever? I'm never allowed chocolate? Not now, after dinner, and giving them that and being very aware that your words and your behavior can impact them. And it's really difficult for some adults that don't have maybe that experience, but maybe just it isn't part of your personality, and that's fine. I always say, I don't think there's any training course you can send somebody on to really feel passionate about SEN education and inclusion. You can send somebody on all the training courses, but if you don't feel passionate and you don't have the empathy, you're not going to enjoy yourself, and that's fine. It's not for everybody, but then don't work with them.
But the problem is every classroom has them, so it's kind of.
I know.
It's kind of, we've all got to learn that everyone learns and works slightly differently. So if you said to a child, "Can I have chocolate?" No, is that no forever? If you say to that child, "Can I have chocolate after dinner?" and then you don't deliver,
yeah,
watch out for the next time you say no. That's for them to list all the times you said you would give them chocolate and you didn't.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of thing, the neurodiverse brain is black and white, but not always. But if you said you would do something and you haven't, well, you're in the wrong, not them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, so if you said after dinner, what you should actually do is make a note somewhere or get that chocolate bar out so it is ready after dinner. Because if you don't deliver and they're having a meltdown after dinner, what's the reason?
And I think
you said you would give them chocolate and you haven't.
And I think that's why I love using rewards to engage children, because it shows the child that you're fair, you're going to deliver. Like, you're going to do this for me. You're going to do some sorting activity in science, and then you get to choose. And it could be that, it's like there might be 3 things that I really enjoy. I'm going to choose laptop, actually, miss. Okay, brilliant. Right, work's finished, laptop, 10-minute timer. And then you build the rapport with the child. Now, this is why I'm going back to the consistency, but also things aren't going to happen overnight, because us as human beings, we need to trust each other. And I don't want to sound cheesy with it, but we need to build up trust. Like, some kids automatically trust you. They'll come in your class, you're a teacher, I trust you. Some children are really reluctant because they may have had a really bad past experience with another school or another teacher going, I can't meet their needs. I don't want them in here. Take them to the library. So we need to make sure that we're really empathetic about all of those things and build up a rapport. And again, I don't want to sound cheesy, but positive behavior approach, it works. We know it works. It's evidence-based. So I'm asking you to do something, but I'm going to deliver by giving you something that you really want to do. And it's imperative that we do set up that rapport with them. And I think it's the impatience of when you put systems in place or strategies, adults get frustrated because it doesn't work straight away. But if you're consistent and you're fair and they can see that actually you're going to deliver, that gets easier with time. And I think where that becomes a problem is when you have children in mainstream and they have to move to a different teacher every year. That's tough, because they almost revert back to the previous, because I don't know you. And that's why transition is so important. And again, we don't always have time for transition, do we?
But as adults, when we have our partners and they annoy you, do you respond in a sensible way?
No.
We don't. We something called petty, which apparently only comes into a thing when you're an adult. When you're naughty as a child, but you're petty as an adult. Different. But your partner will do something, and you will be petty back.
Absolutely.
You won't solve the problem. You'll be petty back. And in a new relationship, you might be petty back. Why? Because of the previous relationship. You've got that baggage with you. So if a child comes to your class with behaviour issues, maybe they're just petty.
Yeah.
Maybe they're just petty, and the last teacher didn't support them, so they're literally going to go, well, you're not going to support me either.
No.
Prove them wrong.
Yeah.
So build that relationship, build that trust. And I'm not saying the behaviour issues won't be there, but if they trust you, they might choose one of the other options in how they communicate their needs are not being met.
Yeah. And I think it always boils down to what's in the best interest of the child at the time, because again, we tend to, as adults, try to, and I say we as a collective, try to modify neurodiverse children to be neurotypical, because that's what we feel that that schools should do. They should, teach children to be upstanding citizens. And so, well, actually, you can't modify them, and we don't want to. Actually, I don't want to anyway. But looking at, what's in the best interest of that child at that time. And if I think of a young man that I worked with, as soon as he came in the morning, he would want clay, well into sculpting. And I'm laughing because I know that my colleagues are going to listen to this and they're going to be laughing about it as well. He'd been on transport for like 45 minutes. So I don't know what had happened. Like maybe they went a different route, or maybe he didn't have his breakfast. So as soon as he came in, he'd request it verbally, and we would just see that he was bubbling. What's in his best interest? Give him the clay, right? Some people would be like, no, it's it's registration time, and that it's just like, why do you want, like, the adult, like, to the adult, like, do you want the clay to play with? And they're like, no. And you're like, well, then just give him the clay. Like, I don't understand that mentality, is that we're giving in, or that we're not setting them up for the real world. And it's like, what does the real world look like? Because the real world to me looks like everybody's different and everybody has different needs. So I don't understand this reluctance to just give the child. We're not giving in. I don't know where that stems from.
It's like if I came up to where you work and let's go for a coffee, and I got to the coffee shop, and rather than letting you order what you want, I just chose you the same drink I'm having, and you're like, I don't like coffee. But no, we've come to a coffee shop. We said we're doing coffee. Have a coffee, but I don't like it. We all have our own choices, yeah? There's so much flexibility, but there is a thing that if you try and make a neurodiverse person appear neurotypical, you are going to fail.
Yeah.
You are absolutely going to fail. Yeah. Spent years trying to do it to me. All I learned is I hate school.
Yeah.
Yeah. All I've done since school is learn and work in education and love it. I am me. I do the way I work. I'm not going to conform in the exact same right way you want me to. However, I will be really good at the things I'm good at and rubbish at the things I'm not. And I need help on the things I'm not good at. But you're never going to convert them into a neurotypical child.
No.
And a quote that I read this week, which I absolutely love, and it is, an axe forgets, a tree remembers. And if you think of that neurodiverse child being that tree, every little axe hitting them, every single thing, you're rubbish at this, you need to do this, you need to do this, that is forgotten by the teacher saying it.
Yeah.
But that tree will remember it all.
Yeah.
That will shape that tree forever.
I love that. I'm going to steal that.
I read it and I was like, that is so good.
Yeah. I mean, I think going back to what you're saying and going back to the structured teaching, it's looking at the child's strengths and what they're interested in, because actually they have got so many strengths, and it's looking at what they can do and not what they can't do, and using those strengths to almost kind of predict the day for them, predict the teaching for them. If they've got a special interest in cars, well, then when we're doing maths, let's use cars. And it's not rocket science. And again, it's like we were saying earlier, it's adaptive teaching, but we have to adapt the way that we are towards those children, like you're saying, with the language as well. And some teachers find that very, very difficult. And it's almost, we say it at work, it's almost like being an octopus sometimes, because that child needs something different from that child, from that child, from that child. That child needs limited language when you speak to them. That child needs a lot of praise when you speak to them. That child doesn't like it when you say a negative. So you can't say no or don't. So you're constantly having to flip between these different personalities and what they need. And actually, within a mainstream setting, if you've only got 2 or 3, but the rest are neurotypical and they're just going to be happy with, yeah, well done, good work, guys. I don't think it's too much of an ask to just kind of invest. And we have this saying with the educational psychologists that I work with is you spend to save, right? So you invest from the get-go. And that's from when they start in your class to when you're resourcing for them. Those would be the children I'd be resourcing for first. At the end of the day, I would be going round and be going, right, where did they get stuck and why did they get stuck and what do I need to do to make sure that they can access that lesson tomorrow? Then these guys, they're, you almost plan backwards, don't you? Like where do I want them to get to? I need to go all the way backwards. What do we need to do? Where do we need to start? And then the majority, whatever, if we don't want to use middles or hires, they're going to be fine, aren't they? They're just going to access whatever's on the PowerPoint, the smartboard. But these guys need investing. So if you invest in them and you make sure that your resources are really good and you've preempted, you've put systems in place, they've got a success criteria, they've got a reward, your day is going to be so much easier tomorrow, right? Because you've thought about everything that they're going to come up, and don't get me wrong, we're humans. Something might go wrong. But why did it go wrong? What is it that we need to do? Or maybe they're just having an off day and that's fine as well. And I think I love that spend to save because it does work. Because otherwise what's going to happen tomorrow is you didn't change your resource. You didn't put a success criteria in. You didn't, give them some support like a word bank to help them. We'll just wing it tomorrow. What's going to happen? It's going to be chaos because you've not invested. So you're just you're firefighting every day then. And then that's when the child becomes a problem then because you're, every day, just invest.
And that spend to save isn't just a financial thing. It is your time.
Absolutely.
It is your energy.
Yes.
It is your stress levels. It is everything about what you do. It's putting out investment. And one thing I just want to touch on, which is there are children who don't like no or don't. They don't like negative language. It doesn't mean you do not have boundaries.
No, absolutely not.
And I know from conversations that there are children in the current education system who are hardly ever in a classroom and they have a TA follow them around the school because they can't say no. It's like, fine, you can't use the word no, but you can word everything a different way. You can still set boundaries and you can have expectations. Just because they don't like no, you don't give up on them.
No, and I think, again, that's a skill in itself, isn't it? Because it's being able to walk into a situation where there's behaviour escalating and knowing when a child is in crisis and when it's time to intervene or to whether just kind of let it play out and then have a conversation at the end. But as you said, it's not a no. Our young man, we just say later. That's sufficient for him because he's so anxious about something. He wants to do the laptop now, and it's like, well, maths first, then laptop, or later, or he'll ask when he's going home, so we show him the visual timetable. And again, sometimes it can just be about putting a visual in place and not overstimulating with the language, because you might say to him, laptop this afternoon, and then somebody else might say to him, maths first, then laptop. He might go to another adult and they say, laptops tomorrow. So it's like, so sometimes us as adults need to really have almost like a sixth sense and communicate with each other, like, I'm leading on this, so I just need you to just be quiet, actually, because we're going to just overstimulate and escalate the situation. And as you said, kids like boundaries. All children, we all like boundaries, right? But again, having a visual system in place that has, whether it's, we've got lanyards with things like kind hands, so that we're not saying like don't hit or something. We just prompt it. We're just waiting, whatever that might be. But again, that's a skill. I don't know where we learn that, because every child is different. But we need to go in knowing that actually we just need to be quiet for a bit and just assess the situation. And then the amount of times I've walked into classrooms that they've been trashed because the child has requested something, they've been told no, and the whole place is trashed, and you just have to wait. And then eventually, they're sort of calm and they're kind of ready. And then you say to the adult, what happened? What's happened? And it's like, they asked me for the laptop and I told them no. okay, right, what can we put in place then so that this doesn't happen again? Is it that they need their own individual timetable? Is it that we need to, just build up the work, maybe 5 minutes worth of work, then the laptop for 5 minutes, and whatever it is that gets them engaged, because children that are dysregulated will not learn. They don't engage. So actually giving them the laptop or the clay when they come in first thing in the morning, not a bad thing, is it? Because they're on side for the rest of the day. They know you're going to deliver. They're engaged. They're ready to go. So it's just, as you said, it's that thing of when you've got that kid running around the school with the TA because nobody really wants to kind of unpick it. It's the medical model of disability, isn't it? That's the problem. We're not the problem. That's the problem.
But also, it's that sort of, sometimes people go, we can't, you got to prepare them for life. You can't just give them a laptop. It's like, well, actually, health and safety execs say that if you are working at a computer, you need to stand up and walk away from your desk every half an hour. So that's kind of been in since the 90s, maybe even earlier, movement breaks for adults.
Yeah.
Yeah, that if I work here for half an hour, I need to get up and we go make a cup of tea.
Yeah.
We walk to someone's desk. We go have to do this. We go to the toilet. We have a movement break as an adult. Yeah, we kind of walk away from what we're doing. We do something else. Yeah, these days we might get a phone out, whatever. But you have time to do this. So why can't we do this in school if we're preparing them for life?
Yeah, and I think that's one of my colleagues used an interesting analogy where somebody's talking about, laptop time and during lunchtime. And we had a child that was really anxious when he eats, really doesn't like certain textures, gets really, really kind of like overly dysregulated like before lunchtime, smells, so we do eat in the classroom. So when we were trying to transition this idea of like, you can have your lunch in the classroom, and you can have the laptop at the same time, and everyone was like, oh, he shouldn't have the laptop while he's eating his lunch. So my colleague's response was, okay, so I'm going to come into the staff room at lunchtime, and when you're eating your lunch, I'm going to take your phone off you. And they said, why? And he said, because you're not allowed to look at your phone while you're eating. That's the rules, right? And I just love the way that he just put that to an adult context. And it's the same thing when I say to staff or any adults, and I'm not knocking teachers at all. I want to make it very, very clear that, it is a difficult job. And I do really want people to kind of, listen to this and unpick it and think about, the systems and preempting, because I think that is the key. But I do think it's imperative that when we apply certain things to children, do we apply them to us as adults? And it's that mutual respect as well, is getting out of that mindset of like, me adult, you child, you do as I say, because actually, like as you were just saying from your own experience, what does that do to you as you transition to being an adult? Like, just makes you feel really rubbish about how you are and how you are as a person. And it is really important that we reflect on whatever we're imposing on the children. Will we impose that on ourselves? And when I say I'll go into a class or I'll speak to teachers on training and say, do you have a whole class visual timetable? And they'll say no. And I go, well, they're quite easy to make. A lot of them are online. You can just print and laminate them. Oh no, the kids know what we're doing. Okay, fine. If I took your calendar and your phone off you now, would you remember everyone's birthdays in your family? Absolutely not. Would you know what was going on tomorrow, this afternoon? No. So we all have systems as adults. A system is not something that you put in place for a little bit, because we all need systems. You don't just go, oh, yeah, they're speaking now, so they don't need that visual timetable anymore. Hold on a second. How do you know? We all have systems, even through adulthood. Even
Outlook is a visual timetable.
Yes, exactly. And you can color code it, which is great.
Yes, so it's doing it for you. If we talk about symbols instead of words.
Yeah.
Yeah. Imagine using your phone with no icons.
That's really good. I didn't think of that. That's amazing. Yeah, because obviously you always notice, don't you, when an app icon changes, you're like, why is Lloyd's Bank?
If you're looking for Facebook on your phone, you look for a F. You look for the symbol. You don't read all the icon names.
That's so good. I love that. I'm stealing that as well. I'm getting a lot.
They're just things we do as adults.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you look for a shop, so you're not looking for a word. You're looking for their logo.
No. And what I love about children, particularly with autism, is the visual strength. And I think it's so important that we use that, because it's, if your strength is your visual memory, let's use that. Like, that's a high emerging skill. And as you just said then, like, if we took all the logos off, we would not know what we were doing. And then we would get really annoyed, wouldn't we? We'd get really annoyed, but then we'd be expected to calm down. I don't know what's up with her. Why is she all upset? Because they took the logos away from the app.
My daughter, on her iPhone, there's an app where you can change all the icons and colour, and she basically organises all her phones as colours, and she knows, like, red is this group of apps, and she knows where they are. But she gives me her phone, I just go, ooh, I can't use this. No. And I have to swipe to get to the list of apps, and I just type it in.
No.
I cannot use it. Just one thing to touch on what I remember, that eating and screens, is, I know there is loads of research, I'm not going to quote anything, but there are families who eat at the dining table.
Yeah.
And there are families who eat on the sofa.
Yeah.
If their typical way of eating is in front of a screen on a sofa, that is their typical way.
Yeah.
Whatever the reason at home that is like that, saying they can't do that at school is odd.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is having that empathy and also that emotional intelligence to understand that everybody's different, families are different, and not having the judgment there as well is really difficult, because I think some people will look at, families, particularly with children with additional needs, or there might be social care involvement, and already there's a stigma attached to that family. And it's like, no, that you just need to put that away, and let's just deal with this at the moment, and let's not think about all of those things, because actually what we want at the moment is for him just to eat. Like, that's what we want,
See, we always used to eat dinner as a family. Every night we used to sit down, the four of us, and eat dinner as a family. And then my wife went back into teaching.
Yeah. That's tough.
And now she's very busy, and everyone has their own lives, and our lives don't join up anymore.
No.
So we don't eat as a family unless it's the weekend.
No, we're the same. We're the same, because we both work in education, and the kids get fed at 5:45, and then we'll eat at like 8, 9 o'clock. And it is usually, if it's a weeknight, then it's usually at the table with laptops.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing. We know what we should do.
Yeah.
But the way the world is and what you're trying to do in your job can prevent that. So it's not a good people eat at the table, bad people don't. That's just not how life is these days.
No.
And I was really proud we all sat at the dinner table and we all had those conversations. It teaches you lots. But we haven't been able to do that for the last year and a bit.
No, and that's almost going back to what I was thinking earlier, is about how we measure success and what success looks like. Because, what you're describing is that they sound very successful. They sit at the table and they converse. And again, applying that to learning for children with additional needs, and this success looks very different.
Yes.
What we think is successful is very different. So there was a thing maybe 12 years ago when they started opening up the additional resource provisions, is almost selling it as a rehabilitation centre. And I found this so bizarre, because I'd worked at an SEN college before. So I moved, and it's the first time I'd worked in sort of like a mainstream setting, really, apart from when I was doing my teacher training. And it was, the children start here and then they go back into the mainstream. And I was like, what are they talking about? And it was almost like saying to parents, if we'll put them here for a bit, and then they can go back into mainstream. I'm like, why do they keep saying back into mainstream? Because actually some people need different things, right? And it was almost like this, the measure of success was whether your child was able to access integration. That's how they were measuring success. And I found it really bizarre, because if I apply that to a physical disability, so if I've got a child in a wheelchair and I come in and I tip them out on the floor and they don't walk, and they're still not walking in 5 years' time, have I not succeeded with their learning? I just find it really odd the way that success is measured, and just you using that description of you sitting around the table. That's what I
could kind of argue it is a success, but what they see is that child learned how to conform in the school.
That's it.
However, if you change that if we learn what children need in this provision, and then we provide that in the mainstream as well.
Yes.
then that is a success.
Yes.
That we learn how to shape the school to meet their needs as well as everyone else's. That is success. But that's not what's happened.
No, and I think there are some children that can tolerate and can access, an ordinary provision. They can, then they might start off when they're in reception, they might have some speech sounds issues. They might have lots of other things that they need. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for early intervention. I think it's imperative. But if you've got a lifelong learning condition, then that's not what we should be selling. We shouldn't be selling this thing like this is your diagnosis and that's fine. And we're going to go all the way through life with that. And we're just going to have high expectations and try and challenge and teach them as much as we possibly can academically and emotionally. And some children will kind of go for integration and actually they find it, actually they really enjoy being there and they don't find it overstimulating and they don't find the fact that, there's loads of bunting with punctuation everywhere, really overstimulating. So, and that's fine. Every child is different. But again, going back to the fact that progress isn't always linear, you can't say, okay, hold on, what's going on? You've had him since reception. Why is he not in mainstream yet? He's been with you for 5 years. What are you doing? Well, you must be doing something wrong, because some children just cannot access that environment, and that's absolutely fine. As you said, we can try and use those quality first teaching and transition into the main. And some children will go, oh, this is great. So predictable. It's very similar to what I'm used to. I know what's happening. My anxiety is alleviated. I know what the expectation is for my work. I know how to achieve the outcome. I know to go back and, check my punctuation because Miss has put that as a visual at the top, like check your capitals. That's fine. But for some kids, that's just not going to be appropriate.
It could come down to how well they can advocate for themselves.
Yes.
So if they can sit there and go, I need this, and that's provided, great.
Yeah.
If they sit there going, well, I need this, but I don't know how to ask, and I'm not sure I trust them, then they are going to struggle.
Yeah.
It's giving them that confidence. But that then comes down to, if you ask for it, it's got to be provided.
Yes, and again, we're going back to the square peg in the round hole, because those are the kids that you'll kind of go, oh yeah, don't mind him coming over because he just sits there and he does his work. But actually inside, he's getting really frustrated and he's going to go home and take it out on mum. And
this is one of the things where we talked about attendance before. Is he might be present in that classroom, but is he learning?
Yeah.
Just because he is there and not disrupting, does it actually mean he is learning and getting anything out of that day in school?
Yeah, and I think that's where we need to, really think about what the curriculum looks like, and like you said, the curriculum meeting the child's needs rather than the child meeting the curriculum's needs. And it's really tough in mainstream, isn't it? It's really tough. But there's just little things I think that we can do that are just easy wins, and going back to the spend to save, that hopefully will make things easier for teachers to meet the needs of those children, but also for those children to kind of feel valued as well. Because if Miss has gone out of her way to make sure that my success criteria is in communicate and print or widget, or it's visual, like that shows that she cares, that she wants me to be able to access this lesson. So already I'm feeling like somebody's actually trying to meet my needs now, rather than giving me the same that everyone else has got that I can't understand. And I think, like we were saying earlier, it's about catering for those children first. Let's cater for them, because actually the rest is going to be a lot easier, because they're going to be able to access the lesson pretty much with no reasonable adjustments. But those kids that do need that adaptive, let's start with them, and then surely that's just going to make everything better tomorrow.
I loved, before I became a parent, I think my sister was a parent first, we watched Super Nanny a lot.
Yes.
And obviously in teaching, you're not going to do the whole naughty steps thing. You need a lot of them. But generally, the gist of every single episode is the parents were inconsistent.
Yes.
The parents weren't clear.
Yeah.
The parents just tried to get on with it with no effort at the beginning, so it went wrong later and required a lot more effort. They didn't spend, and it cost them a lot later.
Yeah.
And generally going shopping, doing this. The children didn't have an understanding of the expectations. They didn't have an understanding of that. It wasn't what they expected. It went wrong. Parents they weren't regulated themselves. They got dysregulated. They weren't doing, and car crash.
Yeah.
And generally, the gist of everything is Put more effort in at the beginning.
Yes.
So everyone's clear of the expectations. Get them more involved. So that's one like going shopping. Give them a shopping list. Ask them to get things. Be them involved rather than just trying to get through it. You'll come out of it, and it might take you slightly longer than what you initially intended it to take. However, there isn't the fallout, which is now going to take 2 hours to resolve.
And I think that's the thing, like you were just saying, is it's sometimes the first time, when you sort of put the boundary in place, you're going to get pushback. And that could go on for 2 hours, but actually the next day it might be 1 hour 40, and the next day after that, and that's really hard, isn't it? But that's progress, right? Because the first day it was 2 hours, and now it's less and less and less, and it's going back to what's a good boundary look like, and what does a terrible boundary look like? And I think that's a real skill in itself, isn't it? Because like if we talk about the eating the lunch with the laptop. Should we not be putting a boundary in there? Like where do we know what's about? I mean, the boundary is surely like, don't start trying to cut other kids' hair with scissors, and not saying that children don't need to have a sanction for when they have made a bad choice, if you like, but making sure that that's clear, that they know that actually that is a bad choice. So there will be a sanction.
Yes, there are non-negotiable rules and there are negotiable rules. There always are.
Yeah,
always are. And in every situation, there are always rules which are a rule, but they don't always apply.
No, and what's fair for you is going to be what's fair for me. So some kids will say, "Miss, it's not fair. So and so just spat in your face, and you didn't send them to behaviour turnaround." And I'm like, yeah, but that's because that child got really, really upset with Miss Lefort because Miss Lefort was telling her to do something that she didn't want to do, and that's fine. And but those kids, they've got verbal reasoning skills. They understand what you're telling them, and you can go and have a conversation with them afterwards and explain. This child finds this really difficult, and her way of letting us know that is that she spits, and that's something that we're working on. But at the moment, that's her strategy for us to. And yeah, it's like you say, it's that consistency, isn't it? And it's putting the time in first. And like we said, with the spend, it's not financial. It is your time and your effort. And there are some easy wins as well. And I always think as well, if you do those resources for those kids, then surely that's going to be applicable to other children in the school, but also children that you're going to get in next year.
Yep.
And those strategies you can apply to those kids, because that over time, if you're consistent and you invest and you explicitly teach them, like, this is your success criteria and you need to do that before you come and speak to me. I'm not going to mark your book until you come and do that. Do those things first. Surely next year, similar need comes in. You go, oh, amazing. I've got loads of stuff saved on my USB. I'm just going to get that printed.
And I think there has been research where it sort of says what takes up most of the teacher's time. And generally it is behaviour.
Yeah.
So you already know that the current system isn't working because everyone's spending so much time on behaviour.
Yeah.
So put that spending in earlier. Mm-hmm. Yes, it will kind of, it's a double hit at the beginning because you're still going to have the fallout afterwards, but you're putting extra time. But that fallout afterwards will reduce.
Yeah, and it's being productive rather than reactive. And I think as adults, we spend a lot of time being reactive rather than productive. It's quite hard, isn't it, to kind of preempt something and go, actually, I think that's going to cause a problem. I need to do something about that now. You're like, oh, I'll just deal with it tomorrow. And then you're just firefighting. And that's really stressful. That's because you're not, there's no learning going on for anybody then, is there?
I think what we should do is set everyone a challenge. So when we're recording this beginning of January, this summer, you're not going to book your holiday till the day you go on holiday.
I love that. Yeah.
See how well that works for you and your family. You're going to turn up to the airport and then book your holiday.
What flights have you got?
Yeah, what's in your suitcase? Hot stuff. Well, we've got Iceland. But that sort of thing is you plan your holiday, yeah?
Yeah.
You choose what you... So you do proactive stuff, and generally the holidays do work out well.
Yes.
We plan things. We work out, actually, when can we see our friends? Anytime we generally plan things, it works well. When things are reactive, like your car breaks down, it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
So we know proactive is better than reactive. We know this from all our lives, yet we still don't always listen to ourselves and our previous experiences.
No, and I think that, I just think, we're talking about workload constantly, and we're talking about, well-being, and it's I just, again, it's going back to, is it a lack of skill that teachers find to be able to meet the children's needs? Like, what is it about it? Or is it that they don't feel it's their responsibility, or that they just think, well, actually, this child's probably only going to be with us for a few months because then we'll get them a change. There's lots of different things going on. And I'd like to think that it's just lack of confidence, I think, particularly when I come across teachers, they just don't know where to start. As we were saying, like, where do you start?
So someone was telling, I can't remember where it came from, but it was the idea of this teacher said, my role is to get them through their SATs. So I am teaching them academic stuff.
Yeah.
I don't have time to deal with all these behaviour issues. I've got to get through the English and maths. And this person was going, yeah, if you kind of worked on the behaviour first, then the English and maths will follow much more smoothly later on. But it was that the priorities in their head from that pressure above, from the league tables, from the local authority, and those Matt wanting those to be the top school and those results, that's the pressure. Yeah. And it's kind of, we're not kind of going, yeah, but if take a step back, if we kind of work on that behaviour, there'll be so much more learning for everyone. Yeah.
And I think that's why we spend September, the first week back, like, you need to come up with your class charter or whatever it is, or your agreement. But I think it's with the HEX training, the initial thing is that they call it being grandma. So if somebody wants something, you just give it to them straight away, so that they know that you're going to, like as we were saying with the chocolate earlier, like, you're going to be really fair with me, I can tell. So when we're talking about building up like tolerance of work activities for these children, we're not expecting them to write a whole facts file on tigers. Actually, we're just expecting them to do one sorting or matching activity, and then they're going to get like 15 minutes laptop. So they're going to get a longer reward than they are spending on work time. And over time, you can decrease that, because I think that's a lot of the fear with the sort of the teach systems and the structured teaching is, yeah, but they're spending 15 minutes on the laptop every time they finish an activity. Yeah, but that's going to decrease after time, isn't it? And some children will no longer need the laptop anymore. They'll just be quite happy with their achievements, but some of them will still need it. I mean, I'm not promoting spending 30 minutes on the laptop after just writing my name, but if that's what we need at first, let's just do that.
Because the aim is that they can spend a month on an activity, and then they get paid.
Very true. It's very true.
You spend a whole month on this activity, and then I get my money at the end.
That's really unfair, isn't it? Because actually, so yeah, if we apply that logic, that seems crazy. I'm spending all this a month.
So yeah, start 15 minutes after 50. Yes, they can do that, but the aim is they can do a whole month, and then they get the reward.
Should say that actually. I like that. Taking that one as well. But it is. I mean, yeah. As I said, it's building up. It's chunking work. It's very systematic, and children, in my experience, children like systematic. Like, I like systems. I love it. I like to know what I'm doing. Exactly what you're saying. If your car breaks down, it's really difficult. But if there is something systematic that I can just follow, and I know exactly what's happening all day, then that's going to make everything so much better. But also, as we were talking about, making the work slightly adapted so that it's just on the high emerging skills. Again, we know that if our threshold is low, we're not going to start researching, the ear defenders. But we might just ping out a few emails, actually, because that doesn't take up a lot of sort of bandwidth, if you like. And applying that to the kids as well, and knowing that we're not giving them the answers. We are just building up the tolerance of activities, but also, again, going back to making the connections. And they're doing the work independently, and they're following a system throughout the day. And that they are engaging then, because everything's so achievable at the moment, which is fantastic. And then you can start to put demands on, and you can start to challenge. But we have to get those routines embedded first and foremost, because we love routines. Adults love routines. We love systems.
Definitely. Can imagine working and being told, you will earn this money throughout the year, but we're not going to tell you when you're going to get it.
No. Or we're not going to tell you when you're going to get it, but also we're not going to tell you how you need to get it. Because today you're going to be cleaning toilets, but tomorrow it's going to change.
But imagine trying to plan your life, everything about your life,
really
but not getting that paid on last Friday or whenever it is a month, yeah? You'll get paid at some point throughout the year, and it will be this amount.
Later.
But it might be 8 weeks because I forgot them, but you'll get double. But you couldn't function in the world.
And that's we have access to a behaviour service in Ealing, which I said my borough. I did know we said borough, yes. Which I don't always use really, because I do like to think that I can take on the world and that I can fix everything in my school because I have a really good team and I've got a really good skill set. But we do use them sometimes because I just don't have the capacity. There's one of me, and there's I think we've got 44 EHCPs. And that's just EHCPs. That's not children that are on SEND support. And a lot of that, again, as you were saying, is just making sure that the rewards are throughout the day and accruing sort of like when you're, and I'm talking about more neurotypical children here, that when you're, you're doing really good sitting there, Dale, I'm going to give you 3 ticks. Yeah. Oh, well done. You finished, you wrote the date. That's great. I'm going to give you 3 more ticks. Okay. That equals 6 minutes. Okay. So the first few times you do that, right, 6 minutes of your reward or whatever you want to choose. We can go and play football if you like for 6 minutes. But what happens so frequently is it's now 5 to 11. I've given Dale 15 ticks because he's had a really good morning, but actually it's my coffee time. So sorry, Dale, we're going to move those minutes to your lunchtime rewards now. Well, I'm sorry. Are you going to put up with that? Because it's like, well, hold on. I've just spent the whole morning doing everything I was supposed to do, but now you're telling me I've got to wait till lunch. Yeah, but you're gonna, and then it gets to lunchtime. Same thing happens again. End of the day. There's an end of the day assembly. We'll do it tomorrow, mate. Yeah. No, absolutely not. And it's honouring that and going back to the mutual respect.
Yes.
You do that for me, and I assure you that I will do that for you, because that's what we're going to do.
And that sort of thing is, my children have picked me up on that. They have so many times. They're like, you said you'd do this. We didn't go swimming. You can remember why we didn't go swimming? No. We went to Legoland. It's better. Yes, but you didn't take us swimming. It's like, really?
Oh.
And you learn that, fine. I have to keep a mental note of things I said I would do. And if I don't, I will preempt it with an apology beforehand. I know I said we would do this, but because of things out of my control, we cannot do this then. Let's do it. And we put it in.
Yeah.
And it is, rather than me not doing it when I said I would and then picking me up on it, I do it and we have that, and they understand.
Yeah.
It wasn't smooth at the beginning, but as they've got into teenagerness and stuff, it's got smoother.
Mm.
But it's understanding that I've said I would, I need to deliver.
Yeah.
If I don't deliver, I'm in trouble.
And it's going back to what we were saying about I'm an adult, so I'm telling you what to do. And adults actually reflecting. Now, don't get me wrong, some adults are fantastic at this, about reflecting and going, actually, what I did was wrong then. Like, I said the wrong word to you. Or, yes, you're right, I said that we would go and do that. But actually, something's now come up and I'm really sorry, but I'm going to come straight back to you, and not being afraid. Because if we're asking children, we're telling children how to behave like reasonable human beings, and I'm saying that in quotation marks, we need to model that. We need to model that. And if you publicly, have a go at a child for doing something, and they, I told you to go and do that, and they go, yeah, I did. Okay, fine then. You go, I'm really sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't realise that. I do apologise. And it's really important that we see whatever we apply to the kids, we need to apply to ourselves. Because when we talk about, the logos and the cars breaking down, or me taking your phone away from you, like, even if people just listen to this today and just come out with that, like, every time something happens, I'm just going to apply that logic to myself and think how I would feel. I think that would be a real big step, to be honest. And that's really hard as hardwired adults, to try and reflect and say, oh, actually, I messed up a little bit there, and I need to kind of fix that, because they are children. And I always say to people, kids don't wake up in the morning and go, I'm going to go into school, I'm going to really annoy Miss Lefort all day today, and I'm going to spit in her face, and I'm going to slap her around the face as well. Yep, that's exactly what I'm going to do when I go to school. Nobody does that. They do not do that.
And even if you said, if you, in the morning, you went to the right, today you are going to spit in my face, you're going to do this, they'd look at you just going, I am not going to, no. And they'll be so like, I am not. Then the day happens and those things happen.
Yeah.
It's not intentional. They're dysregulated. There are so many. They wouldn't want to.
No.
In their regulated state.
No. And I think that's really important, is that they are children and they are still learning and they don't know some things. And if we can, like I said, if you can hand on your heart, go through a mental checklist of like, do they understand what they're supposed to be doing now? Do they know when it's going to be finishing? Do they know what's happening next? All of those things. And they're still really dysregulated. Then we need to be looking at other strategies. And I always say, we've got a toolbox with loads of tools in it. And I am not going to give up on those children unless I've used all of my tools. And sometimes that's really hard work, but actually you will find some strategy, you will find a tool, and something will just click and something will work for that child. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is amazing. They're engaging now. We sorted that problem out. They had an issue with that. We went through all of these things. We put in all these strategies. We trialed them. That didn't work. We put another one in. And now something, and the feeling of that is just amazing. And I think that's why people that work in SEN find it, we say it is so rewarding when something just happens and that child, and you can see that they're proud and you're proud and you're like, this is amazing. And it's just, I find it's going to sound awful, but I find it quite boring in mainstream, if I'm completely honest.
I really want to respond to that, but we've been talking for an hour and a half.
Yes, I know.
And we're supposed to be a 45-minute. And I could just keep talking. There are things I want to say that, but I'm not going to, even though I really want to.
Oh, bless you.
I was always, if I ever went into teaching, I would only ever work in specialist for that exact same reason.
Yeah.
So, thank you for coming on the show today.
No worries.
Really enjoyed it.
Me too.
If you don't follow us on social media, please follow us on social media, on Twitter, at The Sencast, on Facebook, The Sencast, on Instagram, The Sencast, and TikTok, Sencast. And before we go, I'd just like to remind you to check out our Sencast sessions. With over 150 great CPD sessions, and if you haven't accessed a Sencast session before, these are video CPD sessions with some of our podcast guests as presenters. We run 9 live sessions, we have 9 recorded sessions, and we have 2 free send briefings every single year. The sessions are £10 per school, and you can watch live on the day or watch it later on. They are yours forever. It is a really great way to get CPD around SEND to all staff, and you can now subscribe to all the sessions for £175 a year and access everything. And you'll find more about the Sencast sessions on the Sencast website. So thank you for listening. We'll be back soon with another episode of the Sencast. It is goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Bye, everyone.